My wife, Sarah, worked for this guy, the kind who loved calling himself an alpha male. You know, one of those men who thrives on ego and being in charge. And the worst part? He had the nerve to make a pass at her. That level of disrespect towards our marriage set something off in me, a fire I could barely keep under control. I mean, who does that? How could anyone be so brazen, so full of themselves? That night, I came home expecting Sarah to be there, like usual. Normally, dinner would be simmering on the stove, the smell filling the whole house. But this time, things fell off. She wasn't home yet, and it was already getting pretty late. My gut twisted, like it knew something wasn't quite right. Just as I was about to pick up my phone and call her, it buzzed in my hand. "Hey, are you still at the office?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, but I'm on my way home now. I've got a little surprise for you," she said, sounding upbeat, though something about it felt vague. "Should I go ahead and start dinner, or should we order something?" I asked, still wondering if everything was okay. "No need for that tonight. There won't be time," she replied, which left me even more confused. Before I could ask her anything else, she hung up. About 20 minutes later, she walked in the door, and the moment I saw her, alarms went off in my head. Sarah looked a mess, clothes all wrinkled, no stockings, makeup smeared, and her hair was a disaster, like she'd been through hell and back. "Tough day?" I said, trying to play it casual, but my eyes were glued to her, scanning every inch. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer and pulled me into one of the tightest hugs she'd ever given me. Then she whispered in my ear, "You know I love you more than anything, right? You'd do anything for me, wouldn't you?" I nodded without thinking, remembering all the times I'd bent over backward to make her happy. But something in her tone was off, like she was holding back. And then she started talking about her boss, Adam, and some conversations they'd been having at work. Apparently, they'd been talking about relationships, but not in a casual way. Adam had been feeding her all these new ideas about marriage dynamics, ideas that clearly stuck with her. "I know you let me decide on a lot of things, where we go on vacation, what we have for dinner. And I love that about you," she started. "But Adam's been saying that some relationships work better when the man takes a more submissive role. It's got me thinking, Jake. It's awakened something in me, something I didn't even realize I wanted." I was a bit thrown off. "Sarah, I don't mind you making decisions about the small stuff. But when it comes to bigger things, our house, our finances, we make those decisions together. That's not about submission, that's about being a team. I've always thought marriage was about not sweating the small things, you know." "Maybe," she said, her voice softer now. "But Adam sees it differently. He's strong, confident. He calls himself an alpha male. He thinks men like you, kind, caring, are naturally more inclined to take a back seat. He's been putting these ideas in my head." I could barely believe what I was hearing. This Adam guy, so full of himself, had somehow twisted her entire view of our relationship. "Is that what this is about? What exactly are you trying to say, Sarah?" Her pause was unsettling. "Adam's been, let's just say, more direct with me lately. He's confident in his size and power. He's been showing off at work for weeks now. I know it's wrong, but I got caught up in it. It's been exciting." Suddenly, the room felt like it was closing in on me, the air thick and heavy. "Exciting?" I echoed, barely able to get the word out. She looked away, avoiding my eyes. "For the past few weeks, I've been fantasizing about him, Jake. And he's been suggesting that maybe you'd be into it. Maybe you'd even like watching. If not, he says it'll still make us stronger. He thinks after, we'd have the best sex of our lives when I come back to you." I stared at her, waiting for her to crack a smile, waiting for her to tell me this was all some kind of sick joke. But she didn't. She was dead serious. "Sarah," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with shock. "Are you seriously suggesting this? Do you really think I'd be okay with any of it?" She looked at me with pleading eyes. "Jake, I know you love me, and I know you want me to be happy. I think this could take our relationship to a whole new level. My stomach churned. Sarah, have you done anything with him? I asked, my mind spinning, trying to grasp what she was hinting at. No, Jake. I haven't slept with him. She hesitated, though. But we've gotten close. I've touched him, talked to him in ways I shouldn't have. I felt like I was going to be sick. Has he? I couldn't even finish the question, my brain too scrambled. No, not yet. But he's outside in the driveway. He's waiting for me. We're going to talk, and then he's coming inside. You can watch if you want. Afterward, I'll come back to you, and you can have me any way you want. I felt a wave of disgust rise up inside me. Have you lost your mind, Sarah? I almost shouted, my voice thick with disbelief. The thought of being with you after him makes me sick. Her eyes widened, but she didn't back down. I know it sounds crazy, Jake, but I really think you'll love it once you see how much this could strengthen us. This could be incredible for us. My heart raced, and anger boiled up inside me. No, Sarah. Absolutely not. You're crossing a serious line here, and I'm telling you, send him away. Right now. Her face dropped, and her voice suddenly grew small, almost panicked. She hadn't expected me to push back this hard. You've always let me get my way, Jake, she said, her tone turning cold. Why won't you this time? This is going to be good for us. I just know it. She turned on her heel and started heading upstairs, muttering something about getting ready for him. You can let him in when you're ready. She tossed over her shoulder like she hadn't just shattered everything I thought I knew about us. It felt like a punch to the gut. Sarah! I called after her, my voice shaking with emotion. I understand what this means now. I see exactly where you're coming from. She paused for a second but didn't turn around. She just kept walking upstairs, leaving me there, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. How could she not see what she was doing? How could she be so convinced that this insane idea was somehow for our good? I knew what I had to do. I grabbed her keys, her phone, and our shared credit card from her purse in the kitchen. My eyes fell on a dish towel, and an idea started forming in my mind. I pulled out a few zip ties from the drawer and picked up the large carving knife. My pulse pounded as I stepped outside, ready to confront the man who had driven us to this point. I found Adam sitting in his car, casually messing with his phone, completely clueless about what was coming. When he saw me approach, he smirked and rolled down his window, arrogance pouring off him. So, Jake, I take it Sarah told you everything? He said with that smug grin. Don't worry, you can keep her for a little while longer, but soon enough she'll be mine. Before he could finish that cocky sentence, I swung my fist, landing a solid left hook straight into his nose. The crunch of bone breaking was unmistakable, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence as he grabbed his face in shock. You'll need this, I said, tossing the dish towel at him. As he scrambled to stop the bleeding, I looped a zip tie around his wrist and secured it to the headrest. His free hand fumbled as he tried to get control, but before he could react, I yanked open the door and landed another punch, this time square in his gut, the spot he always bragged about. He doubled over, groaning in pain, barely able to move. With one hand tied to the headrest and the other gripping the steering wheel, he was stuck. I quickly tied his free hand to the wheel, locking him in place. Leaning in close, I whispered in his ear, my voice low and full of venom. So much for being the big, strong alpha male, huh? Look at you now, pathetic. You've made a huge mistake, and you're gonna pay for it. He groaned, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. I grabbed a garden hose nearby, its heavy steel nozzle cold in my hand. With one hard swing, I smashed the car's side window, glass flying everywhere. But I didn't stop. I hammered the windshield until cracks spread all over it like a spider web. Then, I turned to the headlights, shattering them one after another, the destruction giving me a twisted sense of satisfaction. When I was done, I walked back to the driver's side, chuckling softly. Looks like your car's gonna need a lot of work, Adam. The look on his face had changed. He was terrified now, his eyes wide as it hit him how bad things had gotten for him. I pulled the carving knife from my pocket and pressed the blade lightly against his throat, right near his jugular. His eyes lit up with fear, and he stammered, "Please, Jake. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. I swear you'll never see me again." I glared at him, disgusted. "I'm not going to kill you. Not today. But listen closely, if I hear from the cops or face any consequences from this, I'll find you. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but someday, when you least expect it, I'll be there to finish what I started." He trembled as I leaned in, driving the knife into the seat next to him. "Sarah's gonna need this to cut you loose. Now you can either take her and drive off, or head straight to the ER, I don't care. But you better make damn sure I never see either of you again." Without waiting for him to respond, I turned and headed back toward the house. My heart was still pounding, adrenaline surging through my veins. As soon as I shut the door behind me, I could hear Sarah calling from upstairs. "Matt? Is that you? Did you and Jake talk things through?" I couldn't believe how clueless she was. How could she be so blind to the disaster happening right in front of her? "Sarah," I called back, trying to keep my voice even. "Matt's still in the car. He wants to talk to you outside. I think he's rethinking some things." A few moments later, she came down the stairs, dressed in nothing but a robe that barely covered the lingerie I'd bought her months ago. She looked at me, confused. "What happened, Jake? Did you tell him everything's okay?" I kept my voice calm, masking the storm of emotions inside me. "I made it clear what his future looks like. You should go talk to him." She gave me a puzzled look but didn't push further. She slipped out the door, heading into the driveway to meet Matt. The second she was gone, I wasted no time. I shot up the stairs, straight to the bedroom, and grabbed a suitcase. Without a second thought, I started shoving her clothes into it: underwear, jeans, dresses, anything I could grab. The adrenaline was still pumping, driving every action. Next, I hit the bathroom, stuffing her makeup and toiletries into the bag. I grabbed her tennis shoes from the closet and tossed them in too. Once everything was packed, I opened the window of the guest room and yelled down at her. "Sarah! You're gonna need this!" I hollered as I threw the suitcase out the window. It hit the driveway with a loud thud, and I could hear perfume bottles shattering inside, but I didn't care. Her shoes followed, one nearly hitting her as it bounced off the ground. She looked up at me, her face soaked in tears, pure shock and hurt written all over her. "Jake! What are you doing?" she cried, her voice shaking. I leaned out the window, my voice cold and distant. "Isn't this what you wanted, Sarah? You wanted to be with him, right?" Her tears flowed even harder, her voice barely forming words. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jake. I thought this was something we could do together, something to bring us closer. Please, let's talk. We can fix this." I shook my head, my voice steady and firm. "Sarah, you've been delusional since you walked in here tonight, talking about making me some kind of cuckold like it was something I'd go along with. I don't know if you're on something or if I've just been blind to who you really are. Either way, I don't care anymore. Get out of my house. Take your lover to the hospital if you need to, but remember this: if I hear a word from the police or anyone else about tonight, there will be consequences." Her face crumpled with guilt, standing there clutching her suitcase in the driveway. "Please, Jake, I'll do anything. Let me in. We can fix this. I'll never speak to Matt again. I love you." I looked down at her, completely unmoved. "I'm packing the rest of your stuff. You'll know where to pick it up. Don't come back here." I slammed the window shut, the finality of it ringing through the empty room. As I made my way downstairs, I could hear her crying outside, calling my name. But I didn't respond. I opened the front door, grabbed her purse from the counter, and hurled it at her. It hit her square in the chest before falling to the ground. With that, I slammed the door again and locked it behind me. Standing there, leaning against the door, I could hear her muffled sobs on the other side. "Jake, please. What did you do to Matt? Just come out and talk to me," she pleaded. But I was done talking. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge, popped it open, and sank into a chair at the table. The rush of adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind an empty ache in its place. I stared out the window, watching as Matt, bloodied and broken, was still trapped in the car. Sarah was struggling with the knife I'd left for her hands shaking as she tried to cut him free. After a few minutes of fumbling, she finally got him loose. I watched as she helped him into the back seat, still crying, before sliding into the driver's seat herself. She looked completely shattered as she backed out of the driveway. I took a long sip of my beer, trying to wrap my head around how everything had spiraled out of control so fast. How had my life taken such a wild turn? I never imagined Sarah would betray me like this. I never thought I'd be standing here, watching her drive away with a man she'd chosen over me. Over the next few days, I ignored her calls. I knew she was trying to reach me, probably calling from new numbers since I had taken her phone. She left desperate messages, but I didn't bother listening to them. I didn't care what she had to say anymore. I kept expecting the police to knock on my door, thinking Matt might have tried to press charges after what I did to him. But days passed, and nothing happened. No cops, no legal trouble, nothing. At least that gave me some relief. Maybe he was smart enough to realize that getting the law involved wouldn't end well for him. Still, I knew I couldn't avoid Sarah forever. There were loose ends, things that needed to be sorted out between us. After a few days of silence, I finally called her. "Come by in an hour," I said, my voice flat. "We need to talk." She showed up exactly on time, her face streaked with tears, exhaustion written all over her. It was clear she hadn't been sleeping. Her eyes were swollen and red. She stood on the porch for a second, hesitant, before sitting down beside me on the steps. We didn't say anything for a while, the weight of everything that had happened just hanging between us. Eventually, she broke the silence. "Jake, I'm so sorry," she started, her voice shaky. "I don't know how I let Matt convince me that this was a good idea, that you'd be into it. Looking back, I can't believe how stupid I was. Maybe it was his confidence, his assertiveness, it messed with my head. I thought it could help us somehow. But now, I see it was all insane. I love you, Jake. I only want you. Please forgive me. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I looked at her, anger still simmering beneath the surface, but I kept my voice calm. "So, how was he, Sarah?" I asked, my words cutting like a knife. "In bed?" Her face flushed as she quickly shook her head. "Stop, Jake. Please." It never got that far. I stayed quiet, just staring at her, waiting for her to continue. "After you and I talked, I realized how wrong it all was. I never slept with him. He's terrified of you, Jake. He fired me the next day, said he didn't want anything more to do with me. He spent 2 nights in the hospital because of what you did, but he told them it was a robbery. I backed him up because I didn't want you getting in trouble." I nodded slowly, sarcasm dripping from my words. "Well, at least he did something right." Sarah's eyes pleaded with me. "Jake, please. I know I messed up, but I'm here now. I want to come home. I want to be your wife again. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I realize now that you're the only one I love, the only one I need. Please forgive me." I took a deep breath, staring at the ground for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady but firm. "We've been together for 5 years. 2 of those years, we were deeply in love. Then we got married, and for the last 3, we've been building a life together. And already, you've either gotten bored or convinced yourself that something's missing. Maybe you think you love me, and maybe part of you does, but here's the truth, you don't respect me. If you did, you wouldn't have even considered bringing your boss into our bed." Her face crumpled, tears falling again, but I kept going. "You wouldn't have thought of me as some weak, submissive guy who'd let his wife sleep with another man and then just take her back like it was nothing. If you truly loved and respected me, none of this would have ever crossed your mind." She tried to speak, but I cut her off, my tone sharper now. "The truth is, you've already been unfaithful. Maybe you didn't sleep with Matt, but you let him into our relationship. You crossed that line. For the past few weeks, while he's been feeding you this alpha male crap, you've been drifting further away from what we promised each other. Her voice broke as she whispered, Jake, I swear I'll never do anything like this again. I shook my head, my heart heavy but resolved. You've already done it, Sarah. And we both know this wouldn't be the last time. Maybe not next year, maybe not even 5 years from now, but eventually, you'll get bored again, or feel like something's missing, and you'll find another excuse. You've broken my trust, and once that's gone, everything else falls apart. Sarah broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but I stayed firm. I've thought long and hard about this, and I know what needs to happen. We don't have kids, our savings are modest, and there's not much equity in the house. The risk of staying with you far outweighs any chance of happiness. I don't trust you anymore. And worse, I've lost respect for you. Her sobs grew louder, but I kept going, my voice calm and final. We're getting a divorce, Sarah. You can keep your car, and I'll keep mine. We'll split what's left of our savings, and we'll sell the house. We're both still young. You can go find someone who fits the life you're looking for, someone who loves and respects you for who you are. I stood up, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. I've already hired a divorce lawyer. We can do this peacefully, or you can get your own lawyer. But either way, we're done. I'll start moving out next week so we can get the house ready to sell. It's over. Sarah was shaking her head, her face twisted in anguish. No, Jake, please. Forgive me. I love you. I need you. It was just a mistake, one I got dragged into. You've got to forgive me. Please don't do this, Sarah pleaded. I looked at her one last time, my expression cold and distant. Sarah, I've said all there is to say. It's time for both of us to move on. Without another word, I helped her load the rest of her things into the car. When we finished, she glanced at me, her eyes swollen from crying, but I didn't feel anything anymore. Goodbye, Sarah, I said, closing the door on our marriage as I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. The days after that felt surreal. For years I had put Sarah's happiness first, always focusing on making her life better. But now, for the first time in a long while, I found myself alone. Strangely, it felt like a weight had been lifted. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but ending things gave me a sense of peace I hadn't expected. I had no desire to look back. Once the divorce process started, I realized I needed a change of scenery. I'd always dreamed of taking a road trip across the country, something I'd never done because I was too focused on being the stable, dependable husband. But now, there was nothing holding me back. A few weeks into my journey, driving through a remote stretch of the Southwest, my car started making weird noises. Eventually, I had no choice but to pull off at the first exit with a gas station and an auto shop. The mechanic gave me the bad news: the engine was shot and needed a complete rebuild. Frustrated, I wandered into a small diner nearby. That's where I met Zoe. She owned the place, and from the moment I walked in, something about her stood out. She had this spark, this sense of adventure and independence I hadn't seen in anyone else. I didn't know it at the time, but meeting her would change everything. Zoe convinced me to stick around while my car was being repaired. Over the next few days, she showed me the hidden beauty of the area, taking me hiking, rock climbing, and out into the wilderness. Her energy, her love for life, began pulling me out of the fog I'd been stuck in since the divorce. One night, after a long day camping under the stars, things heated up between us. We kissed, and the passion that followed felt like a release, a moment where I could forget everything and just live in the present. We made love under the night sky, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. But the next morning, guilt crept in. I wasn't ready for anything serious, not after what I'd been through with Sarah. I told Zoe this, expecting disappointment, but she just smiled and shrugged it off. Don't overthink it, she said. Let's just enjoy the moment. Zoe was different. She didn't need promises or long-term commitments, she just wanted to live fully, right here, right now. And for the next few weeks, That's exactly what we did. We spent time together while my car was being fixed, not worrying about the future, just enjoying each other's company. When the mechanic finally finished my car, I realized I didn't want to leave. But Zoe, always the wise one, told me it was time. "There's more out there for you," she said, her eyes full of understanding. "Life's full of surprises. Embrace them." As I drove away from that little desert town, I felt like a different person. The anger and betrayal that had weighed me down for so long were gone. Zoe had helped me rediscover something I thought I'd lost: my own sense of adventure, the ability to live for myself. I left with a smile on my face, knowing I wasn't the same man I had been, the one consumed by hurt and rage. I was stronger now, and the road ahead was wide open with possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Thanks for joining me on this emotional ride of love, betrayal, and self-discovery. If this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more stories like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and as always, feel free to share your own experiences. We'd love to hear your story.